On this week's show, we've got Kuda Musasiwa, Tariro Makadzanga, welcome back, Juliet LeBreton, Kuda Kwashe Manzanga, and last but not least, we've got Federico Bescotti. Of course, Karen, who's our resident SOTZIM trustee, is here with us again. And as she does, she's going to kick off the session and give us an update on what SOTZIM has been up to this week. So welcome, everybody. Nice to see you all.
We had the donation on Friday from Stanbic, which was just phenomenal at St. Anne's Hospital. We've been working extremely hard to make sure that we were compliant, and I'm very happy to say that we managed to get the letter from the Ministry of Health to the LCM, Little Company of Mary, who got the letter to officially give St. Anne's the status of a COVID-19 hospital, which is fabulous. So we're going to be able to open very soon. We're still raising money to make sure that we can support the doctors, but everything at the hospital is going well. They've been under training, and the nurses are doing their thing, and with the training, we've got the doctors lined up. SOTZIM is really active in making sure that we are reaching out. We've been having loads of conversations with all the different NGOs as well as corporates, doing tours of the hospital. And we've got MOUs signed with some of the corporates as well, just that they'll support us. So it's a continued drive. We're hoping to this week also ramp up our media, get some billboards out there, because we're still really desperate to make sure we have awareness going on. We're wanting to try to assist in terms of quarantine, to give people and the government to buttress the quarantine efforts that they are putting in place, because that's been, I think the spike has really been, and this is why I really wanted Tariro to be on here. The spike has been through, again, it's been mostly imported. But we're thankful that nobody is in any critical condition in any of the facilities that are available. And I'll talk more about some of the other facilities that are going to come on board and within the pool of where people can go to if they do get ill. The 2019 number is still working very well and still receiving lots and lots of calls, which is the Ministry of Health 2019 number that SOTZIM runs and hosts for them. So yes, it's been a very busy week, lots of work to do, and we're also going to be appointing in the next week what we're going to be calling Goodwill Ambassadors around the world. You are going to be one of them, I hope, Mucha, as well as Tariro, for us around the world, who really will just be advocates to be able to go out there and or spread the word to be able to donate and help us here in Zimbabwe. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Nice to see that you've been busy. Nice to see that you've got donations coming through. And I would request that people do stay on after we finish the official panel, because we've got big thank yous to dish out this week from all the positive endorsements, all the charitable nature of everybody who's extended their hand. Right, so tonight we're talking about disruptors and innovation. And for anyone who's in the corporate space, you would have heard the word agile company being thrown around quite a lot. Agility has typically been associated with the technical space. However, corporates have actually just adopted it as it translates to decision-making processes, to speed of digitization, and to generally how people work. So how apt is it to assess the spectrum, if we can imagine one, which on the one hand looks at stasis, on the other hand, we've got absolute chaos. In between are the people who move and shake and bring some order to what has become quite a chaotic world at the moment. So if you're just tuning in on tonight's show, we've got Kuda Musasiwa, who is the vendor-in-chief of Fresh in a Box, a social impact organization. He will talk about his product and his space in the market. We've got Tariro Makadzanga, who's been on the show before. We know her to be our Harvard grad, our medical practitioner. She's our virologist, immunologist. I kind of throw all these terms at her, and I'm probably incorrect in doing that, but I just associate her with mad scientist. Then we've got Juliet LeBreton. Juliet is the founder of Kufemazim. If you haven't heard about Kufemazim, where have you been? These are the guys who are challenging Philips, GE. They're challenging the hardcore no names around manufacturing of breathing equipment, but at low cost. She too will talk about her product and the activity in her space. We've got Kuda Kwashe Manzanga, who's a currency trader, and he's pulled together a school that teaches forex trading. We want to understand what he's been doing in that space too. Last but not least is Federico Bescotti. He's our MIT grad, who's soon to be a management consultant. at McKinsey. So guys, really nice to see you. I'm really excited to talk to you tonight. And as we do, we are going to dive in. My first random question to you tonight is, why this space of disruption? Let's start with Federico, because he's the one who's just made a fresh decision around his employment.
Thank you, Musha. I think for me, to answer the question around disruption, I think especially having spent the past 4 years at MIT, it is a place that is constantly focused on innovating and disruption. Particularly, I've been involved in the startup space around MIT, and they're constantly teaching this idea of kind of what you were saying around being agile and always being on the edge and disrupting. And we've studied a lot of how big businesses recently are being disrupted by incoming innovators from the bottom. And so it's always been something that's attracted me, I think, particularly coming from Zimbabwe, where there is a lot of opportunity. And I've always had this idea that there is opportunity in Zimbabwe and I want to disrupt and also do good. There's space to do good in Zimbabwe. So now I'm recently graduating and I'm going into consulting, as you said, which I think for me is a way to get a high level understanding of the way the business world works from a strategy perspective. Tying it back to COVID and Kufema, which is how I've been involved, really. When I did find out of the work Kufema was doing, I did kind of in the nature of what MIT does of disrupting and collaboration, I thought immediately that there was something I could help in some way and help Juliet and her team disrupt, per se. And so I joined on immediately. I mean, I have a couple of months of free time ahead of me, so I thought this was an excellent opportunity to get involved and help Zimbabwe, because from the stories I heard, we really were not prepared to handle COVID-19, and if there was anything I could contribute, I would want to do so.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much for that. I'm going to now move on to Kuda, because the idea of there being a lot of opportunities in Zim, you found your niche, you found a need, and you've run with it. And I understand for a couple of years now. Could you talk us through your process in identifying what that need was and how you then ended up creating Fresh in a Box?
Hi, guys. So thank you for having me on with such esteemed people. I'm very, very honored to be here. The Kufema guys, I'm in awe of you guys and the stuff that you're trying to do, especially with the fact that we only had 16 ventilators in Zim. So well done for everyone who's here. I started Fresh in a Box purely out of desperation. I was an aspiring farmer trying to sort of find a market for my tomatoes at the time. And, you know, having to deal with supermarkets, etc., middlemen, Makuronyere, Mbare, it was really difficult to try and even get a fair price for our produce. And one of my passions, obviously, being IT and coding and stuff. I mean, my first instinct was, how do we go directly to customers using some of the tech that's out there? Our model is not necessarily a new model. I just thought, how do we really make it a great model and be able to get farmers together to create one of the biggest farms in Zimbabwe, which we've successfully done with our 1,900 or so farmers that we're working together. And also, how do we combine really great logistics and great tech to be able to take these orders and get to as many people as possible. And we're really proud right now that we're faster than Amazon Prime. I mean, you can order and get your veggies and your shopping and stuff within 1 hour in Zimbabwe, right? We're really proud of the young team of people who are, you know, mushrooming from me and my brother in Honda Fits to over 200 people now working for our weird little Fresh in a Box startup, who were all unemployed in October 2018. You know, we're all unemployed at the time. Sorry, 2017. We're all unemployed, really, to be honest. So the reason why we started Fresh in a Box was, again, like I said, we're desperate to try and get our stuff to market. We really thought that it's not good that as farmers, we are seeing our produce go through the Mbare Msika, where I was born, by the way. I'm a Mbare boy, which is no longer fit for purpose. It's no longer a place that we should be buying food from. There's no free toilets. There's an excess of 200,000 people milling around with no free toilets, no sanitation, no water, etc. And that's where the majority of the food from Harare and then obviously to all other cities comes from. And I think that's not acceptable anymore. And we needed to disrupt that process. Now coming back to what's happening with COVID, we as an online company saw this happen. And before everyone started wearing masks, we were the fools a month before, wearing masks, COVID trained, how do we do zero contact delivery, etc. So by the time that we were locked down in Zimbabwe, we were well prepared and we were really ready to service the people of Zimbabwe, and our business just shot from 350 orders a day to damn near 2,000 something, which we had to cap off. So
that is brilliant, and I am going to come back and deep dive on all the amazing work you've clearly been doing over the COVID period. Now, you've kind of talked about the employment that you've created through your organization. There's a training, there's equipping that's required to kind of bring youth on board and tackle this high unemployment issue. We have got Kuda Kwashe, who is training and educating people on currency trading. And we wanted to just, or I want to find out at least, why and how you're able, with all the negative externalities in Zimbabwe, how you're able to run such a business. I'd be petrified, banking professional, and I'd be petrified of that market. So talk to me about your thought process and how it's worked out for you so far.
Thanks, Mucha. So when we're talking about Forex trading, we talking about trading online, right? So the online currency markets push about $6 trillion a day, and it's accessible to anyone. It's been online for years, and you can basically start trading if you've got access to a broker and a couple of dollars, you can get plugged into the markets. So I built a school in 2016 at great expense to myself and my family. And what we just realized pre-COVID was we didn't need to actually keep doing physical training sessions. So we had a school in Bloemfontein, Mutare, Harare, and Lusaka, and we just basically put our course online. And in the last 2 months since we've launched, about 7,000 people have taken our course. That's throughout Africa. So that's been quite powerful, and it's free. So it's financial, teaching people how to maneuver the markets. If anything, it's not necessarily that people are going to make money. Not everyone can make money trading online, but it's just your ability to absorb international news and to make decisions. And it's quite an empowering thing to do.
No, it absolutely is. And again, I will be back. I'm coming back to kind of pick your brain a bit more on this.
Yeah.
I would now like to hear from Juliet. So I'm thinking of the CEO of Beckton and Dickinson, thinking, oh my goodness, there is a low-cost alternative to stuff that we've always had a monopoly over. Talk me through your thinking at the point that you heard COVID is in town, or potentially is going to be in town. I'd imagine that there was a real concern for sub-Saharan Africa and Zimbabwe particularly. What did you do?
Well, thanks for having me on. I think it all started basically when I actually have been working in HIV prevention for a number of decades. So I do live here in Zim, and I heard the story of our patient number 2, who unfortunately passed away in Harare. And one of the issues was there were no ventilators available. And at that time, 2 months ago, at the end of March, ventilators were seen as the number 1 priority piece of equipment we needed to save lives in COVID. So I sent a WhatsApp message to a group I'm a member of. It's actually a TEDx group here in Zimbabwe, and just said, who wants to help me bring together a team of engineers and doctors and see if we can create ventilators and make a difference here in Zim. And the really funny thing is, backing up, that I did this 2 days before when the first patient was announced, and there was a case in Victoria Falls. And I sent the same message to the WhatsApp group, and everyone was like, oh, it'll never work. Oh, it's so difficult. Oh, how do you get the engineering? And then you've got to get medical approval and blah, blah, blah. Problem. 2 days later, I said, okay, now you see why I want to do it, because we could save lives here. And within 3 minutes, I had probably, 50 people saying, I'm in. And it was just overwhelming. And by the end of the day, I had more than 300 messages on my personal number saying, how can I help? And the phone was ringing. And it was just kind of, whoa, there I was, committed and excited about it. But I have to say, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a doctor. And this just goes to show that anyone can make a difference. Anyone can make something happen. Anyone can take on the big boys, as it were, and just disrupt and bring together this unusual team. We are super agile. I'm glad you used that word. We're 100% volunteers still 2 months later. That's tough when people need salaries, myself included, but we're still going because we're here to make a difference, and it seems to be working. We've just tested our ventilator this week. It's based on the MIT model, so you might see a little bit of a connection with Federico there, and we have other machines that we're making as well that I'll tell you about later. But yeah, so basically it was just a decision, from the heart. And it was kind of, I think I'd also been a bit tired for a while of being one of the people who would say, someone needs to do something about this. And then I caught myself out. I did it all the time. Not only that, if I'm really honest, it was worse than that. I went to other people and I said, you should do this. And they were like, I don't want to do this. I've got work, or I'm busy, or I don't have the skills, or whatever it was. And then I thought, blimey, well, if no one else is going to do it, it's going to have to be me. So, and, you know, of course, I assumed that everybody would laugh at me because I'm female, because I'm not an engineer, because I'm not a doctor. I do have some knowledge, but actually people realized that the higher cause was more important. And you can bring in the team, you can bring in people who can support you. I mean, look, I have Federico, I have all kinds of incredible people on my team and all kinds of supporters.
Fantastic. I'm now assuming the role of Tadiro on the panel. And as our scientist, I'm sure her first question is, who has tested it? How do you know it works? Does it meet industry standards? Tadiro, when you heard about COFEMA, what was your kind of guts, or what is your gut sense response to this innovative pathway?
No, thank you. Thanks for having me on. When I heard of COFEMA and so many other initiatives around COVID, it's been really exciting to see what people can do when they come together and work together. I personally felt that the focus should not be on ventilators. The reality is a lot of patients who are getting onto ventilators, many of them don't make it onto ventilators. They're very long hospital stays, very complicated, and we simply don't even have enough of the ICU capacity, ICU staff, etc. And that low-cost interventions are needed. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for innovation in Africa around how do we support respiratory diseases, not just COVID, because COVID will come, will go. We do have people every year at Pari who need to respiratory support, and there isn't that kind of support. So I think some of the interesting ideas around low-cost options, non-invasive ventilation, which for COVID is a little bit more complicated, but certainly thinking about that beyond COVID is really important. So I think all the work around innovation in this space is really critical. If I could just add, because I assumed I was on here to answer kind of COVID medical questions, and I'm so surrounded by this incredible group of young innovators and people doing incredible things. Just to point out that innovation in healthcare is so critical, and it needs to be funded and supported. So, it's easy to innovate, and I don't say easy flippantly, but it's much easier to develop, say, a Facebook or an app. You can do that in your dorm room or in your garage in California. It's much harder to innovate around building technologies for healthcare. So, the clear thing with COVID is that those who have a strong biotech environment are the ones who are going to succeed. So those countries that can make vaccines, those countries that can support science and innovation, those countries that invest in science, research, and innovation will have a leg up. And it's so critical in Africa and in our governments to support young innovation in science and technology. We need to be developing vaccines for Africa because Africans are genetically different from other people. We have other diseases. We have so many other things going on. And if you're not investing in biotech science, which is so critical. It's why you don't have PCR kits to develop a test. We have brilliant young students at UZ who could have designed primers to make a COVID test and have the Zimbabwe COVID test up and running very quickly. But nobody makes primers. You can't just order DNA primers in Harare and have them there the next day. So if we as a society don't appreciate that, we need to invest in science for us and support young science innovators. That's how the future is developed. So it's really exciting to see people doing innovation and would love for us to have more innovation in biotech and in healthcare science.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Tadiro just gave my closing speech, so I suppose that brings us to the end of today's
Sorry, Mucha, that was not the intent.
It's fine. It's actually great and quite timely. On the issue of funding, because this is quite an important issue for anybody who's got a big idea. Zimbabwe is awash with youth, middle-aged people, grown-ups who've got fantastic ideas, but they just cannot get their hands on funding. Could you tell us, please, Kuda, how you have kind of navigated that space? Was it organic for you? Did you need to have a dedicated fundraising process? process? If not, what did you do? Because this is the question that many people would want to understand. I want to have my own version of a business. I don't know where to start. Give us that starting point, if you would.
Okay, so the first thing that we didn't do was we didn't wait for things to be perfect. The first thing we did was we started with what we had. This is before the fancy logo, before the website even. We leveraged the fact that most people in Zimbabwe right now walk around with computers more powerful than the ones that sent men to the moon, right? Mobile phones. So we started off on WhatsApp. And just like, you said, Julie, you start off with sending a message on WhatsApp, and then you make a promise to your customers that we promise that if you seed fund my business today it was $20 RTGS in those days, right? So if you seed fund my business with $20 today, I promise to bring you a crate of veggies tomorrow. And that's how we started. We literally just made a promise and made sure we kept our promise every single day, with the first 10 customers who mushroomed into the first 100 customers to mushrooming into the first 300 customers. So it was just about starting what we had, not waiting for these perfect opportunities. We didn't do a business plan. In fact, we got our first scale after 6 months. We just used to chuck stuff into the box because we couldn't even afford scales at the beginning. So it's really important to encourage people who are getting into these spaces where they want to start something, is don't wait for the perfect opportunity, perfect environment. Don't wait for, Aunt Karen to give you some cash to start. No, you actually have to sometimes show that you're interested in this, you're passionate about this, and use the tools, the blessed tools that we have as a generation, these mobile phones, which can do crypto and currency exchanges and leverage MIT grads to help build, ventilators. So that's what we did. And it's not magic. What a great time to be alive, guys. What an awesome time. I mean, I know COVID has screwed up our lives a little bit, but otherwise, we have these beautiful devices that we can utilize. We have fast connection. We can talk to 3 billion people, 4 billion people at any given moment. And that's what we decided to do, was to actually step on the shoulders of giants. Our deliveries are so fast because Google has built the maps for us. The best we can do is contribute back and try and make our maps in Zimbabwe better, which is what we're doing. And, it's about using the stuff that's available and making the stuff that's available better for others to be able to lean on us and grow. So that's how we're funded. We're funded by our customers.
So if I'm that kid in Goromonzi who's thinking, well, he's got an unfair advantage because he's already got a platform he can tap into in terms of a following that's able to spread the word, that's able to help him drive his business forward. I need you to encourage that person to think bigger than that. Please give your best pitch.
Okay, so I'm a kid from Mbari, right? The guy who helped me build my first website is a kid from Bulawayo, who used to live with his mom. The other developer that we're using is a guy who lives in Domboshawa. His name is Simpren, and he doesn't live in a house like mine. The kids who are working for me, we found each other on Twitter. None of us had crazy followings, but it's about synergizing. The people who are delivering our vegetables when we got too big to use my Honda Fit was another young guy who had a couple of motorbikes, and he helped us to start up. There was a taxi hailing firm called Windy at the time, which is still around. And Patrick saw us struggling and he came in and sent his cabs during the time when his cab drivers were not too busy. So there's a great way of raising human capital and getting to work together quickly, right? So I cannot get to 1,000 people every day by myself, but we have a lot of great people who have cars and nothing better to do. Tonight, if you want pizza, you can order from Joey's Pizza, which we started, and it'll be delivered in 30 minutes. Why? Because there's a lot of people with cars, and then we have Joe and the guys who are great cooks, and we can get pizza to you fast, right? So how do you work together with people? And let's try as a generation to get together, work together, and really play on each other's strengths. Now, I'm a much better talker than I am a coder. Bakani doesn't talk at all. He's socially awkward. He likes playing on his PlayStation, but he's a great coder, right? So there's a bunch of energy that you can bring together as people, and we can do amazing stuff. I promise you.
There is always a question of social responsibility when we get into business. And Kudakwasha, this one is for you. For that kid who's thinking, I want a get-rich-quick type platform. I've tried my hand at several things. They're not quite working. Let me get some software and trade online. Could you just walk us through your kind of mindset around that social responsibility when you're delivering your teachings, when you're inviting youth to your school? I would like to understand the ethical, I suppose, fabric with which you encourage youth to come and learn at your institution.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll start off by saying, before I, decided to train people how to trade, one of the first things I did was build an actual school. So it's a physical, building. I wanted to show that we will always be there. We've got a physical address. You can find us somewhere. And our courses are free. So the reason they're free is So I started trading when I was at Rhodes. I was 19 years old. That's about 15 years ago. And I thought, if I can give these courses to people for free and help them make an informed decision before they decide to invest in the markets, that's the first starting point. And just to add to what Kuda is saying in terms of raising capital, you must understand that the Forex market or the online currency market or the trading world is huge. So there are lots of brokers, lots of big companies. And what happened is we just approached one of the largest brokers that sponsors Usain Bolt. And we said, look, we are training people for free. What can you do to pitch in and assist in that initiative? So if you do our course, you get $30 into a trading account. So we've tried to reduce the risk as much as possible for someone who is, thinking of taking on trading for the first time. It's basically trying to give people an opportunity to make an informed decision. Because the success rates in trading are very low. I mean, only 30% of traders go on to make money consistently. But yeah, we're doing our part to try and educate people on the markets.
I do think that there is a duty of care to make sure that a lot of these platforms are responsible for people not losing their homes because they've invested everything in something that they may not fully understand. So well done to you for that educational piece. Federico, there's a lot of talk around surviving economic cycles by going down the sort of Bitcoin cryptocurrency route. We don't necessarily see a big uptake in crypto in Zim at the minute. I don't believe that we've got an exchange, for instance. I know that there are people who are thinking about introducing one. But could you just start off by explaining what it is? Because this is a question I get only too often. What is crypto? How does it work? Why is it disruptive?
Thank you, Mucha. In fact, I'm saying it's funny you asked this. I feel like you've stalked me in some way because not that I learned about it, but in my first year at MIT, myself and my friends, we got really into the crypto space. Perhaps naively so, but we were very excited by what we thought was the next big thing. And we all got onto various trading platforms and we started having our fun. And, some of us made money, some of us lost money. But ultimately, like crypto, where it is today is nowhere further than where it was like 3 years ago in terms of the value. Let's say it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. So I think to explain crypto, from what I understand it, the whole idea behind it is that it's a decentralized form of currency, meaning that no central government or body owns it. And in every single situation when I've studied crypto, and Kudakwashi, please correct me because I'm sure you know a lot about this, more than I do perhaps. But in every single time that I've talked about crypto, Zimbabwe always comes up as a case study because we went through hyperinflation and effectively people lost faith in our government. And it's almost like that is the perfect place for crypto to be born and bred. And however, like you say, we haven't really had much of a crypto movement in Zimbabwe, although, like you said, I think there is something happening now. For me, ultimately, I think crypto, to young people, it appears like this great opportunity and like an easy solution. But from my learnings, the depth to which government plays a role in currency and which it's important to do so in controlling interest rates, in controlling inflation, so that there is investment that can be made in nurturing the economy. I don't fully understand the depth to that, but I know it exists. And recently I've started to move away from crypto because from a trading perspective, I like the idea of trading companies like stocks because they are more closely linked to real world events. So, if some CEO changes the business strategy, you might see the reflection in the stocks go up, go down, etc. With cryptocurrency, it's so completely disjoined from reality that it's hard to tie any sort of real world events to what's happening with crypto. And I think ultimately there's a lot of speculation. So sure. I used to be on the crypto train. I no longer really am, but I am keeping an eye on it because I think the underlying motive is good. I think there's just a long, long way for it to go.
Sure. And so for anyone who may start spreading rumors that I'm a stalker, I am not. I am literally just asking random questions to everybody. Kuda, you mentioned earlier on crypto as well, and I'm coming back to you because I've got a related subject matter. So for what you do, have you thought about or are you implementing any type of distributed ledger technology to aid your business and push it forward? Because I can imagine various players thinking, blockchain capability, let me jump into what Kuda's doing. I can offer an ancillary service, but is it something that one, you think Zimbabwe is capable of pushing through effectively? Two, is it of interest to you at all?
So just to be clear, right? So on Fresh in a Box and our websites, we have already baked in a lot of some of the bigger cryptos that are accepted. I think it's Ethereum and Bitcoin. And also we've also baked in other digital currencies that exist like M-Pesa, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the thing we have discovered with crypto is there was a very low uptake of people using cryptos with our service particularly. And I think this is not just, we have a really large diaspora following plus also a local base, but there's been a very low uptake. I think people are not sure about what cryptocurrencies are, and we wish people would take them up more. However, Zimbabweans are used to what we call cryptic currencies. Our RTGS, for example, it's a magical shifting unicorn that can be 1-to-1 with the dollar, and then when it's 80, right? So because of our delicate relationship with cryptic currencies, I think this is the reason why people don't trust cryptocurrencies. I think it's something no one has really explained it well enough. But here's the thing that I believe. With things like Libra about to launch with Facebook, and some of these cryptos becoming far more mainstream and backed and underwritten by serious players, it's something that none of us are going to be able to ignore in the next 5 years. However, people are ignoring it because they think it's not important, like Zoom, like online videos, right? Who thought we'd be doing this a year ago, right? And these things have changed so dramatically. And now that the world is changing the way it is, America's on fire, the Brexiters, everything is happening. We will need a decentralized currency at some point for us to trade back and forth. We will need a way for us to secure the value of our money in a safe way, which is not governed by a governor who can say, let me print some more cash, right? So there is going to be a time when we all have to take this more seriously. It's just a matter of time. Who knew that my mom now understands what a Zoom meeting is? She'll know what crypto is eventually.
Fantastic answer. Thank you so much. I'm going to come to Juliet and break your laughter. You seem to be having fun behind the scenes, so it's time to grill you a little bit, if I may. Juliet, your fundraising exercise, how is that coming along, and what channels have you found yourself tapping into? So has it been one of those where you go down traditional routes of fundraising? Have you had to be quite creative in the way that you've risen funds? What are you doing?
We initially started with a GoFundMe account, which is crowdfunding. However, we found it quite difficult to actually move the money. It took a very long time for it to arrive, but I'm happy to say we have a little bit now. We're also leveraging donor funding because we are COVID responsive, by which I mean we are in negotiations with international NGOs, aid agencies, UN agencies, etc. And can't say anything about that yet, but it's promising that way.
Sure.
And we also have lots of partnerships. So actually, how we built the ventilator, I have no idea what the cost of the actual ventilator we have right now. I'm just being completely honest with you. I have no idea what it costs because we were stuck for a week. Our bill was delayed for a week because we didn't have $50 to buy the bolts that we needed for it, which is crazy, until we could find someone to lean on who would lend us the money. And so much stuff has been given to us little by little. This is the Zimbabwean way. You go around to Halsteads or you go around to whoever it is and you say, please, we need to borrow your 3D printer. National Zimbabwe have lent us a 3D printer for the 2 months, and we wouldn't have a ventilator without it. So we've basically just been super resourceful. People have been incredibly kind. I found it quite difficult asking people. It doesn't really come naturally to me because I like to be kind of fiercely independent. And I think a lot of people do. They find it a little embarrassing, especially when it's small things. But actually, everybody wants to be involved. Everybody wants to help. And the word has spread way beyond me asking people, which is lovely. So people have driven, all kinds of volunteer acts have happened as well. So it's not just giving things, but people have driven the engineers to the workshop when they were stuck. Somebody helped us out with getting permission to move when in the early days of the shutdown, we hadn't registered as a company yet and we couldn't do it because the company's house was closed. So we've found a way around that. So all of these kind of agile ways we found around things that normally would need a financial layout. We're in Zim. We all know how to make a plan. That's what we've been doing. Right. We've been planning it up the wazoo and it works.
Okay, so I'm going to challenge this idea of this working, and I will, in fact, this is an open question, but I suspect Federico is going to be jumping to answer this. The idea of things just working, or us just making a plan, us just adapting, could be criticized for slowing down real and needed progress. right? So if you think about organizations like Lyft, like Airbnb, these guys came on the scene, they've done great things, but COVID has literally shut them down, don't quote me, but they're struggling under COVID conditions. My question to the panel is, what is it about our educational system that prevents us from being cutting edge in our innovation, in the product we push out, in tech and so forth? Secondly, do we think that this is something that's going to change quick enough for us to keep up with the rest of the world?
I could comment on our education. And again, this is not my area of expertise, but I do have the privilege of every year having the opportunity to interview some of our brightest students for the Rhodes Scholarship. And what strikes me is just the amount of grit and talent there is out there. This year, and I hope not to be embarrassing the candidates, but we selected 2 kids from NUST who are just incredible kids. And every year we have these incredible young applicants who borrow their brother's engineering book to learn how to code and figure out coding and solve pertinent problems in Zimbabwe, who are members of an investment club at the university and figure out how could we make things in our community a little bit better. So I'm always impressed by just how much resilience there is, despite how bad things are in our education system. So we see, applicants who are Zimbabweans from humble beginnings, who go to Harvard and have, 4 amazing years, and then applicants who are from similarly humble beginnings who go to NUST and UZ and still make do with what's available. Their teachers are hardly ever there because teachers don't make much money from teaching and need to be doing something else. They have textbooks that are teaching them stuff from the 70s, 80s, and 90s and haven't been adapted. But the kids are just figuring out how to do it. What I would say is it's really up to us, the older generation and the leadership, because imagine if we just made things a tiny bit easier. We don't have to solve all the problems, just a tiny bit easier. Imagine where we would be. There's so much talent and so much youth innovation, whether in Zimbabwe or, I sit in these African innovation groups, and it's just really remarkable that despite everything else in terms of our institutional structures, people are doing a lot. And if we, as the older generation, can just help give people a bit more of a leg up, it would be phenomenal.
Yeah, I could add maybe from a different perspective, in particular looking at kind of what you were saying about discrepancies between making short-term changes versus long-lasting impact. And one thing that I've seen particularly prevailing here in the United States is what I'd say misalignment of incentives, particularly in the startup space from venture capital firms, from VC funding, because ultimately I think we all do need money to survive and to make a living. And the way these VC firms typically operate is that they will push a lot of money behind you, but they want a 10x return within 2 years, or something that is quite honestly like ridiculous in terms of thinking about long-lasting impact. It's all about how can we make the biggest impact, even at the cost of potentially not making a profit for 2 years. However, we capture 80% of the market and then eventually we make profit. So it's all a short-term thinking, which I think is maneuvered from VCs at the top. In contrast to this, for example, 2 years ago, MIT opened its own VC that's called The Engine, which was a novel concept because they were really focusing on deep tech and long-lasting impact, and they were looking for returns on a 30 to 40-year lifespan. So they weren't interested in any sort of business model that had profits within the next 2 years. They were looking at models that had a 30-year return. And so I think when there's a sort of better alignment of interest from that regard, it could certainly help. And similarly, kind of related to this, there's the largest fund on earth, I believe, is Blackstone Group here in the US. And every year the CEO releases a letter to the public, kind of saying where he thinks we should be focusing on investments. And I think people like him have a very influential say, because just this past year, he released a statement saying that I think we should be investing in green tech, in things that work to make a sustainable future. And simply days later, within a week, every single major tech company released a plan to be carbon neutral by 2030 or something like that. So I just think there's a lot of I think, financial impact that influences whether people are making long goals, like long-term goals versus short-term goals.
Sure. It's no secret that sustainable financing is the big buzz phrase. Every bank is trying to push out product in this space. Anyone who sees how the trend is moving is sort of scurrying to figure out, one, whether they can deliver, two, what products they can design. But you've equally got the issue of organizations, small enterprises who may very well want to have sustainable product suite, but banks refuse to give them money because of the tenures of their loans. So there's this relationship that's not quite working out yet. What I did want to tunnel the next question to was, Kudakwashe, you've decided to go down the leveraged product suite, where people are trying to find alternative ways of raising capital or investing whatever funds they have into something that's going to grow the money, that's going to be able to get plugged into their organizations. What trends are we seeing in Zim on appetites for maybe riskier or not so risky products? And in what you do, leverage financing is quite a specialist space. Not everybody gets it, and you've filled that gap by training people. But do you see a future where Zimbabwe is going to have a more exotic, a more holistic set of financial products or not?
That's a good question. I want to go back to your previous question about education and see if I can tie it with the question you just asked now. I think the challenge that we have in Africa, especially in Zimbabwe, is that the education is great, but the culture does not support startups. So you'd find that students prefer doing attachments in big lethargic companies and might avoid going to our vendor in chief there, who is trailblazing, and they're probably going to learn more being attached to his organization, because the world is really about, like, we're talking about disruption and innovation here. And I think that students need to be encouraged to do attachments in those spaces. Now, in terms of whether I see a future where different financial instruments can be used to raise capital, etc. I think one of the biggest problems we have in Africa is our borders. So you find that, again, and I'm talking about Kuda here, fresh in the box, great idea. We want to see it working in Zambia, but we've got this big border. You know what I mean? And so the scalability of our ideas is we're almost like caged in. We do so little intra-Africa trade. We do more trade with the rest of the world as opposed to what we do with each other in terms of African countries. So I think my real issue is not the education, but we need to open up the space to allow the ideas that we have to be scalable. Because you find in America, one idea, a guy comes up with an idea and he's already a billionaire 3 months down the line. You know what I mean? And we've got similar innovative ideas that are solving African problems, but we can only release them one African country at a time because of our limitation in terms of borders. So I'm happy with the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. I think that will open up Africa. But I think as entrepreneurs, if we are thinking into the space, if you want to make money, if you want to make an impact, you've got to think about the whole of Africa. Sometimes we tend to be like Zim focused or my own country focused. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about the education side.
Sure, no, that's a very important point. And I think we all want to see an Africa that's able to trade within its own borders. And we want to see an Africa that's economically empowering itself and not so much reliant on the rest of the world for the government coffers. Kuda, your fresh in a box innovation is one that is indeed scalable. Talk us through the sorts of challenges that you find in this space. So you start this idea that's taken off in Zim. There is absolutely no reason why you wouldn't be able to expand that to Mozambique, Botswana, and so forth. What stops you from doing that?
Well, nothing has stopped me from doing that. I mean, fresh in a box Zambia is doing really, really well, as is the Mozambican arm. What's happening though is that, look, I've been to a lot of seminars and we've done a lot of these kind of conversations where the first thing people say to me, Kuda, love it, great, brilliant, love the tech, incorporate in Mauritius. That's the first thing that most people with VC capital are telling me to do, is leave your country, okay? And I'll tell you why. Team Zambia is one of the smallest headaches I ever have every single day, because even when they trade in Kwacha, which they love doing, by the way, they know the rate is always going to be this to be correct, right? Team Zimbabwe is the one that gives me the most headaches. Why? Because things are so volatile over here, right? So you need to have a guy who changes prices on all your assets all the time, right? because you can't even ask a bot to do it. Yeah, it's just like, that's how unpredictable Zimbabwe is, that you can't write an algorithm that predicts where you're going next. And I think, so we have to remember, guys, that we do think globally, we do think regionally as well. As young people, that's happening. I've been to places, I've talked to kids, I know everyone who is thinking this way. Remember this though, ladies and gentlemen, we as Zimbabweans, colloquially in our speech, are taught not to think outside boxes, right? So, for example, the word for a job in Shona is basa, which is basically basa or boss, a derivative bastardization of boss, right? The word for similar word in Ndebele is umsebenza, which is basically a derivative of servant of, right? So it's almost like we're taught from a very early age to work for other people and to look for bosses. You even see basa, which means there's no boss for you here, right? So if I'm tying this up with your educational question again, some of the issues are deep-seated even in our own language. I still argue with people that there's no word for maintenance in Shona. There's kuchengetedza, but you can chengetedza a broken car, right? So so maintenance alone, these words like these are important colloquially for us to start inventing and in putting them into our vocabulary, even for a young kid who is a potential MIT grad in Gutu, and that kid needs to be trained in TERT in his own language and must have words for things like maintenance so that we can actually grow the brilliant minds that Zimbabwe actually has. We claim to be the most literate country. We must now be the most comprehending country as well.
And literally doesn't necessarily equate to productivity, right? It doesn't necessarily equate to cohesion and collaboration between the various generations. So that intergenerational debate where a young student goes and says, I have this great idea, I'm going to seek counsel, wisdom, funding from my elders. And because you're a child, there's just a sense that, child's play, shelve it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hopeful of this
Absolutely.
younger generation to start changing that sort of narrative and really start encouraging the generations beneath us to think big, think broadly, and then, of course, to support them with the financing that makes or breaks these grand ideas. Tariro, you started off by saying you thought you were coming to speak medical stuff only. You should know me better by now, but but I will come to you now and ask about innovation and disruption. That COVID-19 is, I think it deserves its own place on a platform because it's really just shaken the world about. What are we seeing in the US, in the West, around just kind of innovation and thinking beyond the facts and statistics that we've been seeing on the news around moving us from this current state to hopefully a normalized world?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So I think the COVID situation has forced us to be innovative in many ways. So thinking through the whole disease and disease process. So, for diagnostics, how do we rapidly develop new diagnostics that are effective and accurate? And how do we break down the barriers to letting that happen? Even in this space, we have a young Zimbabwean who's developed aptamer technology for malaria diagnostics and other diagnostics, and he's working on developing a rapid COVID test. So how do we develop tests rapidly to support public health initiatives and the therapeutic initiatives? In the therapeutic space, there's been some incredible innovation around how do we rapidly develop drugs and how do we develop drugs together. So you've probably seen a lot of work on consortiums, some of them led by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, some of them that have come together organically to think about how do we as, say, industry come together, remove the barriers that typically prevent people from collaborating so that we can rapidly screen and repurpose, see if there are any old drugs that do have activity. How do we come together to develop and design new drugs? How do we come together to make sure that we test drugs most effectively? How do we build the regulatory framework to enable clinical trials to move more rapidly? We've seen the incredible initiatives, whether it's the WHO Solidarity Trials, so multinational clinical trials. How do you bring regulatory bodies together? So MRCZ, MCAZ in Zimbabwe, so that not everybody wants to spend 3 months reviewing to approve things. How do we work together to expedite things? And one hopes that these things that have been put in place for COVID will be there for other things. How do we as Africa cooperate around clinical trials? If a trial is being done in Uganda, how can it also be done in Zimbabwe? And how do we facilitate all of that happening much more easily? So I think the epidemic has forced us to rethink some of the things that we've taken as normal and challenge them. What can we do more rapidly, more expediently? And I think this is where innovators, small companies have a lot of potential because they're not encumbered by past and structures, etc. So I do think that this time provides for that kind of opportunity.
Thank you very much for that, Nyandoro. I'm wanting to find out from Juliet how you've navigated the regulatory environment, because this is something that presumably is the bane of any innovator's life, regulation, especially for something that's never been done before. Talk us through your experience, please.
Well, we're not there yet with everything, but
okay.
we have taken the ISO standards for the ventilator, and the UK has developed very quickly, actually. It's at the end of March already. Standards for rapidly manufactured low-cost ventilators and CPAP machines. This is the other machine that we are making. So there are standards that exist, and we do. Luckily, when the first 600 people who volunteered, one of them was from MCAS. So we actually have regulatory bodies inside our online collaborative platform, which is open to anyone to come and see what we're doing. Because we believe in open source, basically, and sharing ideas, so that our goal is basically to save lives and to help people to breathe. And whoever gets there, it's not a kind of competition. Whoever gets there first, whoever makes the biggest difference, we'll congratulate them and work with them. So in terms of regulation, we do have biomedical engineers. We actually, on day one, set up a medical advisory committee with 4, I believe, anaesthetists who could advise us to make sure that our equipment is medically safe, that is fit for purpose. And we also have an oversight from the Zimbabwean Institute of Engineering to also make sure that our equipment won't kind of fall apart, isn't too badly bodged together, actually will start still functioning, because we're talking about lives here. And I took that responsibility very seriously, because to me, that's the kind of biggest thing in terms of navigating the red tape. I'll tell you when we've got there, but so far it starts with building a relationship and starting to do things openly and transparently. And I think that that's made a huge difference, that people can see from day one that we've kind of kept every promise we've done. We've been very open, and every time we've deviated from the plan because we didn't have the right component, we've kind of made a note of telling, we're using this instead of that type of material or bolt or whatever, and we've checked for medical safety within our own network to get quick responses, basically. So I think sure. I think we're lucky that we are. We've just got the good timing, we've got good impetus, and we have done this collaborative approach. It may have slowed us down a bit in the beginning, trying to manage 600 people from nothing when you really thought of it or set any systems up was a little overwhelming. And I'm sure we trod on some toes and probably still do, but we've just taken this agile approach, and we just stay focused on the mission. And we just, I think this is what you do as an entrepreneur. When you figure out your goal, you basically grab what you can and run like heck to get there. And just keep going. And as I said, when you tread on toes, you apologize, and you try and bring as many people with you to help empower them as well. That's part of how we work.
Okay. And Kudapashe, regulation for you, what does that look like, if at all? So this is a gray area for most online platforms. Does it exist in Zim for what you do? If not, do you think it will soon?
Yeah, so funny enough, regulation does exist in Zim because regulation is pretty easy to sort of copy from other countries. So that's already there in the Securities Exchange Control Act of Zimbabwe. The whole regulatory framework is there to set up a futures market, let's say in Vic Falls, which is what they want to do now. So regulation is not really the issue. You see, the market in Zim is not scalable for huge financial instruments to work. Derivatives, a futures market for grain, because let's say you set up a futures market for maize, which is where you can go and buy maize for future delivery, right? So the farmer knows that they're going to get a certain price of maize in the next 3 months. The problem with our country is that, well, the problem with Africa really is that then there's a different maize price in Zambia, there's a different maize policy there, there's a different maize policy in Tanzania. And so the market wouldn't be as fluid as compared to SAFEX in South Africa. So regulation is there. It's always really been there. Securities Exchange Act has been quite robustly reviewed. But I think what's lacking now is perhaps the ability to turn it into a scalable, real market. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, for instance, let's say you had a market for grain, for a futures market for maize in Zimbabwe. You would really only have 4 or 5 big buyers for grain in Zimbabwe. So with that in mind, you almost want a futures market that opens itself up to the rest of Africa. Then it begins to make sense.
Got it. And I was going to say that it's one thing to have regulation on paper, and then it's another thing to actually enforce it. So this is something that always fascinates me, the extent to which we've got the technology to support interrogating people's records, to understand what people are doing, how financial instruments are being dealt, and how money is just basically being moved around. I would be interested to know if that works well, but that's perhaps for another day. For today, though, I've got a comment from Sean Mafunga, who's asking about air transportation, and he's talking about a decrease in the use of air transport, the fuel prices being shot, and then the idea of hedging on crude. And I believe he thinks that, Kuda, you're the best person to address this issue. Do we hedge? Do we think that way? If we are hedging, how effective are our hedging strategies?
Well, I think if you think of it from the perspective of a trader, a lot of people have been trying to go long, which is buying oil with the expectation that the prices will go up, or buying it to store it for use in the future. I think as a country, buying crude oil without the ability to process it as a country really wouldn't be a solution. But as a trader, if you want to trade oil right now, this very second, yeah, that does work. You can jump in and take a position up on oil, on gold, or anything that interests you. You see, when you're trading, you have to make one of 2 decisions. And for Sean, I'll try to explain that very briefly. There's a fundamental decision, so something that's driven by macroeconomic factors, which is basically what you're saying, the fact that demand for oil fundamentally has decreased. Then there's a technical element, which is when do you actually buy the barrel of oil? Is it at 2 o'clock in the morning? Is it 2 p.m. tomorrow? So those technical issues have to be considered when trading, because you could make a loss, because prices don't just go up in a straight fashion. They go up and down zigzag. So you could buy and then tomorrow it drops and you could get affected by that. So that's why I always encourage people to really try to learn the technical aspects of trading or trading. Yeah.
No, absolutely spot on. I know that Karen is going to start giving me some sort of hand signal soon if I don't start wrapping up. So what I did want to do with all of you is really just ask you to plug in your final appeal, your advert for what you do. If there is something that you want Zimbabwe or Zimbabweans in the diaspora, or anybody, quite frankly, to support your initiative, your business with, what is it? And how do they go about supporting it? Let's start with the fresh graduate, shall we? I'm going to put you on the spot. If you're going to become a management consultant, you're going to need to do this stuff on your feet, right? So let's go.
All right, thank you. Well, given that I don't currently own a business, I'll speak to the one I'm involved with, which is Kufema Zimbabwe. Definitely join the community. There's so many ways to get involved. And for myself, I'm not in Zimbabwe, but I thought regardless, there is some way I could help, and it has proven so. So wherever you are, don't be confined by your location. Just join in and see if you can contribute in some way.
Thank you very much. We've lost Tariro. She's had to go back to work. I think she might have preempted I'd ask this sort of question, so she left just in time. Thanks, Tariro. I'm going to go over to you, Kuda, please. Could you tell us about I need you to think about X? Kuda, fresh in a box, Kuda.
Yeah, you called Kuda trader Kuda just now. So,
you know what? I was actually talking to you, funny enough, and he jumped in, so I'm not guilty for that.
He jumped in. Okay. Awesome. Look, we're a Zimbabwe online company that delivers happiness to your homes. We compare ourselves with the best. When we say we're better than Amazon Prime, we literally mean it. And I think we've been delivering thousands and thousands of packages for people in Zimbabwe from other people in the diaspora who need to send much needed food and provisions to their loved ones. So that's going great, and I'm really grateful, and we're blessed for that. But what I would like anyone who's watching the diaspora is to understand that what's happening on the ground in Zim is quite desperate in many of the locations that we're driving around, and we're covering thousands and thousands of miles per day. We've been donating and assisting our customers to take food to shelters and soup kitchens in Chitungwiza, in Zivarasekwa, in Hadcliffe, and so forth. And guys, there's a lot of great initiatives out there, like Kufema again. I would really like our diaspora to know that we are one of the largest diasporas in the world. We're similar to the Israelis as far as having a large percentage of us outside the country. And, you know, we spend a lot of time hammering each other on the internet, being political left or right. And those cliches are going to cause us more problems than they need to. Let's get together and let's do some amazing stuff as Zimbos. I strongly believe with the 4-5 million diasporans out there, with your buying power, with the amount of money that you guys have, you can make a huge difference. People like us on the ground, we would love to take food, provisions, cabbages, mealie meal to a lot of people who need your help right now. We won't be here for long as Zimbabwe. It's a political issue. It's not even about our politics. There's much worse tyrants that the world plays with really nicely. So this social political issue will one day go away, I assure you. But then out of those ashes is going to rise a beautiful nation that is Zimbabwe. And I hope we can all really pull together at this time. I love this platform. I'm really grateful for you guys having me on. Whatever you guys can do over there for us guys over here to make it better for others, let's stick together now. Let's survive this madness. And I promise you that the Zimbabwe that's going to come out of this is going to be beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kuda. Kuda Kwashe, it's your turn.
I think if you guys are interested in trading and you want to give it a shot, jump onto www.tradersupport.network and we'll have a professional team on standby to assist you with the courses and make an informed decision before you take on the markets. It's very lucrative, very rewarding, but very risky as well. So all the best, guys. And thank you so much for being inviting me to this panel. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Mucha. Thank you,
wonderful, thank you. And then Juliet, we like to breathe. Talk us through your Kufema appeal, please.
We do like to breathe. And I must just quickly say, I'm really sorry to hear the story about George Floyd in the US because I have many American friends and I actually have a US passport as well. And I just want to say that Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. So coming back to as an ambassador for breath, this is very important, right? We all need to breathe and we could do without people blocking us from breathing. Enough said about that. So one thing that, I think Fresh Kuda, as I'm now going to call him, had such a good, inspiring wrap-up speech, and he's absolutely right. Zimbabwe, Africa, honestly, is the cradle of innovation. Federico and others will tell us, and we can see by the number of tech companies that are setting up in Kenya, that are in South Africa, that are a drone testing zone in Malawi, all over, that basically Africa is the cradle of innovation because we have to innovate to get by, to succeed, and to thrive. And if we innovate together, we have these young people with incredible ideas and we help them help each other. If we collaborate together stronger, and it's totally possible because on my platform, I promise you, out of the 650 people, there are people you would not see in the same room. You wouldn't see them in the same side of town. They would not be together on very different sides of the political divide. And you know that's a massive chasm here. And they've managed to come together for this because it's more important to them. So if you can find a way to rally people around your cause, whether that is thriving in life, whether that is helping others, whatever it is, now is the time. Let's get together, let's stay together. COVID has given us a chance to rethink, to reset, to pause, and to realize what's really important in life. And what's really important in life is breathing, is helping each other, and we all really want the same things: love, respect, dignity, health, and a way to get through.
Wonderful. And yes, Black lives do absolutely matter. Thank you very much for that, Juliet. I need you guys who are watching online to please feed me superlatives to share with this panel by the time I'm ready to give my sort of final speech. In the meanwhile, we need Karen to just kind of jump in and tell us what she wants to tell us about SOTZIM. Please stay tuned because there's a little bit more information before we wrap up.
Thank you, everybody. I so appreciate you, just incredible people. We are incredibly blessed to have the amazing Zimbabwean people that we have. And I can't thank each of you enough for all your insights. I need to maybe I should have a lottery to see who I can win to have a lunch with, because I can learn so much from each of you. Just amazing. And again, Black lives do matter. And all of this, I always say that God's plans are always perfect. Everything is never by mistake. It is always by divine appointment. and it is always by, divine intervention. And whatever is going on in the world today is literally, like Juliet said, for us to stop and think and just to make sure that we're there for one another. So even with this Solidarity Trust Zimbabwe, it's about making sure that we can be there to help one another. We can be there to make sure that somebody is going to breathe, which is amazing. So thank you all very much. I want to just say a very big thank you to CBZ, who have been amazing, to individual donors, Forrester, to just people who've donated $100, $10, $5. Thank you all so very much for all your donations. Today, we received a donation from Mucha and her friends who are in Dubai, friends of Zimbabwe who are in Dubai. I'd asked Garai to put on the screen a picture of what we just received from them, of masks and gloves. In particular, would like to thank Cleo and Sheena and Tenji and more from the Friends of Zim Thrive in Dubai. Thank you so much for these donations. It goes such a long, long way. We appreciate all of you so much. The job is not over, like I say. At the end of the day, we need to be able to increase and get as much donations as we can to be able to make sure that the hospital is going to be able to operate. Once we open, the LCM Little Company of Mary has received authorization, thankfully and gratefully, from the Ministry of Health to be able to open, which is just fantastic. We're so excited about that. If you're going to donate, please donate. PayPal is not working for us at the moment, so you're going to have to use EcoCash or our Nostro account, but please donate. And we're going to, once we appoint our Goodwill ambassadors, they will start their own GoFundMe in the different countries where we're appointing them. If you're interested in being a Goodwill ambassador, please write to us on our website or to me, to kmutasa@aol.com, and I will be able to put your application through, because we need as many Goodwill ambassadors as we can who can work for us out there. We've got all these amazing Zimbabwean people all outside the country, and we need it. Financial literacy, my goodness, it is such a huge thing. We need that in Zimbabwe. Kuda, vendor-in-chief, you are just phenomenal. Truly, I want to salute you and say, Kuti, Inini, I'm living here in Zimbabwe, but I was born in Malawi. And if you are delivering to Malawi, Malawi's got the best peas and the best nzungu you've ever tasted. And the bananas. So maybe you can swap and trade and bring plantain from the north of Malawi, have beautiful plantain. So, it does build capacity. And Kufema, Federico, incredible. I love you guys. Thank you so very much. Please continue to support and to spread the word about Solidarity Trust, as we will do about each of your businesses. Thank you so much, Mucha. Over to you. Thank you. Oh, I mustn't forget 2019. If anybody has any questions or needs any help, or if they're not feeling well, dial 2019. It is the hotline that is the Ministry of Health and Childcare hotline, which is brought to you, and Solidarity Trust helps the Ministry of Health to bring this hotline to the rest of Zimbabwe. This hotline also requires funding, so please don't forget to support that as well. So thank you so much. Over to you, Mucha.
Thank you very much, Karen. If you've been watching Make a Mark with SOTZIM from week one, I've always used the analogy of us being in an army, and we all have our various roles to play. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? You've missed an incredible panel of innovators, of disruptors, working in various fields: financial, food distribution, breathing equipment. And we've talked through a range of subjects around the role that technology disruption, social enterprise has in a climate such as COVID-19. We are very, very grateful for you spending time with us this evening. Thank you for the gazillion comments and questions that have been plugged in. Because we're unable to address them all through the show, I talk too much. I'm responsible for that piece. We will attend to them after the show. What I would ask of you is that you join us again, same time, same place next week for Make a Mark with SOTZIM. A very good night to you all.